Let's start.
Okay. So, good afternoon, everyone. Today we'll be having a discussion on significance of landscape ecology for sustainable management of natural resources. So, yesterday we had discussed about how sustainable management and sustainable development cannot happen without management of natural resources. So, similarly, this is very important. Landscape is a part of natural resource, and tomorrow we will be again discussing about the watershed ecology. So, landscape ecology, as you already know, like what is landscape and what is sustainable development and what are natural resources. All these concepts are already known to you now. And today we'll be discussing how there is an integration between these three concepts and what is involved, what are the different kind of tools and strategies, what kind of scientific studies which we can do, taking integration of all these concepts. So this will be the outline of the presentation, starting with introduction, objectives of this discussion, then what is what are the principles, what are the methods to study landscape ecology, what is the concept of scale, how this concept evolved, what are the approaches, and side by side I'll be giving you the few of the examples how you can practically apply these concepts in field and in practical studies. So then we'll be studying factors affecting changes on landscape diversity, how we link natural resource management with landscape ecology, what is the future scenario, what kind of studies are available for development in future, and what how we can integrate cultural knowledge and indigenous concepts into landscape management and how it can ensure sustainability. So basically, this term was coined by biogeographical geographer Karl Torp in 1939. He was a German geographer, and he incorporated regional geography as well as vegetation science. So if you see what is landscape, so in ecology, when we study landscape, landscape can be any kind of large area where you can actually see the regional geography and which has a conspicuous unique kind of vegetation which gives a characteristic to that area. That area can be categorized as a unique kind of landscape ecology, having a system which is unique in its own. So it combines the spatial approach of the geographer and functional approach of the ecologist. So it is basically an amalgamation of two concepts, two subjects, that is geography and your ecology of that area. So it emphasizes the interaction between the spatial pattern, how that area is spatially or allocated with different kind of vegetation of species, vegetation species, and flora and fauna, and what are the unique characteristics, what are the different kind of ecological exchanges and dynamics that are going on in that unique area, and what are the processes and what are the causes and consequences of spatial heterogeneity, like different kind of heterogeneous components that are existing, different kind of uniform components that are existing across the range of scales. So what kind of scales are required for which kind of studies, that will also be that we will also discuss. And then why is there need to study land ecology? When this term was coined by Karl Troll, why did he coin this term, and why, what was the need to evolve this concept? So basically, when there was felt that there is a dearth of development and dynamics of patterns, when there is a dearth of study of ecological phenomena which is existing across spatial and temporal scales, and there is a need for study of ecological events which are taking place in a particular region but having a larger natural geographic boundary. So it can vary from a few meters, few kilometers to hundred and thousand of kilometers. So then we needed broad spatial scales, which can study ecological effects and which can determine what is the spatial pattern. So it deals with the effects of spatial configuration of mosaics of a wide variety of ecological phenomena. That was a requirement of this kind of study. And then with this landscape ecology study, we can also study actual effects of spatial pattern on ecological processes. How a spatial pattern, how the kind of vegetation which is changing from one area to another can also change the kind of species that are existing in that area. Okay, so there are different kind of softwares, different kind of models are there which can help you study this kind of spatial relationship for different kind of systems. For example, if I talk about groundwater effects of landscape ecology, so there will be different software for groundwater modeling. And for example, for insect multiplication, or for the studying the diversity of arthropods in that area, there will be different kind of software. So it also helps in examining various processes at spatial scales, how it is varying across different areas, different regions in a landscape pattern. Then how it also helps in revealing spatial patterns in variables and their dynamics in different seasons, in different cropping patterns, in different breeding patterns of animals. So this is basically a science which combines land management, land use planning, and the ecological systems of that area. And it also helps in study of human factor for creating and responding to spatial heterogeneity. So this unit which we'll be studying today, it will describe concept, principles, methods of studying, as we have already enlisted in the outline. So these objectives will be fulfilled at the end of this session, and we will be explaining problems of scales and its importance, and how various theories in landscape ecology evolved, what is the future, and then establishing the relationship between a landscape ecology and sustainability science. So basically, a landscape ecology is characterized by a heterogeneous land. There is a land system which is not completely uniform. And I think most of the naturally existing landscapes, they are not uniform, they are not homogeneous. Like if there are if large man-made systems are there, they can be homogeneous, because for example, you can see large spans of timber production. So that is a man-made system, and it will be completely homogeneous in terms of the kind of species that have been planted there for timber production and harvesting. And similarly, you can see large, big scale golf courses are there, or there are tourist spots which have been created through hotel hospitality sector. Okay, so they are man-made, and there the systems are homogeneous, and there this kind of species of flora and fauna that are existing, they are controlled in a manner so that they can provide an aesthetic value to that area. But when we study landscape ecology, we study systems which are naturally existing, which are heterogeneous land area, and they are hierarchically structured in terms of matter, in terms of energy, in terms of nutrient exchanges, in terms of boundaries, in terms of flows between the organisms and the resources, as well as the pollutants that are generating. So all this is controlled in a heterogeneous system in a naturally existing landscape. So how it basically evolved in a hierarchical system, if we study, so it started from a disciplinary research, and it went to multidisciplinary research. So landscape ecology is basically a product of multidisciplinary research, where many different concepts of landscape, structure, function, and dynamics are on one side, pattern, processes, scale, and hierarchy are on the second side, and the third side of this triangle has conservation, management, planning, and design. So these are the ultimate objectives of studying landscape ecology. So we start with basic definition of structure in that area, functions of that area, then dynamics which are existing in that landscape. Then we determine patterns, processes, scales, and hierarchy which are existing over a period of time. So that is called temporal scale. And then in spatial scale, for example, if we are studying few kilometers, what will be the different kind of studies which can be done in that few kilometer area of that landscape, and how ultimately we will design the conservation strategy, management plan, and design the area in a manner so that there can be sustainable development, and the resources which are existing in that area, they can be managed sustainably by the human factor that is existing, or the indigenous or tribal people that are living there. Okay, so it contributes to sustainable science by maintaining sustainability, by providing a hierarchical and integrative ecological basis, by providing a holistic approach for sociological system, as well as providing methods and metrics of quantifying sustainability. So if you see the interactions which are going in your landscape ecology system, so there is a landscape state, and then as we have already discussed, we will be studying structure and function of that system, what kind of biota and abiota diversity is there, then flows of organisms, nutrients, and nourishment, what kind of energy flows are going on, what are the changes and processes, what are the dynamic stability, what is, and then what is the landscape development. So all these things will be integrated, and then we'll be able to establish what are the interactions in landscape ecology that we are studying particularly. For example, yesterday we had I had given you an example of a community based natural resource management system where income generation activities are linked with the natural resource management of that area. So again, coming back to that example, because I have practically worked in that area for 3 to 4 years. So there in Keshopur wetland in Punjab, where migratory birds were visiting every year. So there, when we were about to close the project. So in any international funded project, you have to give a project closure report. So in project closure report, there we had to mention that what kind of interventions were done when the project was closed, and the kind of funding that was involved in the development of that project. Has it been useful actually as per the designed objectives before the start of the project? So when we started the project, we had objectives. Yes, we have to increase the number of migratory birds that are visiting that area. We have to ensure that income generation activities are linked, youth is involved, community is involved. We have to identify the threats and risks that were there, vulnerability of that system to the, for example, the habitat destruction that was being caused by the local community, or the kind of dead mass that was created every year, which was converting that wetland towards land. Okay, so we want that wetland should be there as a wetland system only, with a mix of water and land, and it should not get converted to land with continuous continuous formation of dead mass, or continuous eutrophication, or increase in levels of fertilizer that were being used for the agriculture system in that area. So all these risks were identified, and then we took imageries from Google. Nowadays Google is very handy. Even if you are not able to download satellite imagery very smoothly, you can definitely have imagery of Google Earth. So we took an imagery of Google Earth, and in Google Earth, if you see, there is a time scale where you can have an imagery of 5 to 7 years back. So we went to a period when the project was not started, and we took an imagery, and that imagery has shown how much degradation was happening. And then we an imagery of the year when we have implemented the project, and it showed a drastic change in increase of the area of wetland, increase of the area of region where more migratory birds were nesting and having nesting grounds. So that kind of feature, that kind of study can be done in landscape ecology. So when we do R&D projects, we have to establish what kind of objectives we are going to fulfill, and how the ecology of that whole system will be impacted by our project activities. So these characteristics of landscape ecology, the kind of nutrients, for the, like I told you, pollutants. For example, if agricultural land is there around that landscape area, there is an overflow of fertilizers and pesticides and insecticides which is going into the water body existing in that landscape area. So there you have to see what are the hydrological flows reaching that aquatic system from uplands across the landscape boundaries, and how that is impacting that area. So maybe in some area there are not many agricultural land, maybe there is a breeding area of elephants in that area. So for that purpose, then you have to establish what kind of, for example, if there are many number of huge population of elephants is there, and they are excreting solid waste on daily basis. So the kind, and the downstream is having a pond area where the overflow from that breeding site of elephants is going. So that will be again causing pollutant through the waste of elephants to the pond. And what kind of flows are there, and how it can be created in a manner so that it is not impacting the quality of water in that pond, and it is not causing nutrient enrichment in that pond to cause eutrophication or processes like that. So those kind of things have to be done from project to project, and they vary from project to project, and they are heterogeneous in nature. So you have to study the landscape structure, landscape functions, and how different kind of activities are going on, and how exchanges are happening between different kind of species that are existing there. So then the changes may be in a variety of ways. The rate of change may vary across a landscape, and like some landscape ecologies are very strong, they are very like they are very compact and sturdy, and they are not impacted with introduction of any invasive species. But sometimes that ecology of a landscape is very sensitive. If, for example, in virgin areas where there has been no development around for kilometers of landscape, so in that virgin area, if any new species enters, it completely overpowers the existing indigenous species. That's why we always tell every person who comes for environment clearance that you should never use any invasive species in your landscaping plan. So because land and invasive species, they can be a deterrent to the growth and multiplication of indigenous species, which are basically inherently important and significant for the sustenance of ecology, local ecology of that system. So then there are many small landscapes or patches which coalesce into larger ones, and depending on the intensity and frequency of disturbances, it changes gradually. Okay, so if there is a large disturbance and there is an imbalance of increase in population of one species, it can cause disturbance in that ecosystem. For example, I gave you just an example of how agriculture pollution from agricultural lands can cause pollution, or how even waste from large number of existing species can cause imbalance. For example, if there is a breeding ground of elephants. Okay, so it is basically we have to see what is the landscape integrity in that area. So that is the measure of health of landscape level, and it encompasses the complex interactions which are going on. It and the indicators are the productivity and diversity. So if one species is large in number, it is not giving you the diversity is lower. Okay, so but there, if there is a balance of and diversity of large number of species, then definitely it's a very integrated landscape, and the productivity of the landscape is very high. So the exact relationships between the landscape integrity, the structure and function, they are not linear so far. They are non-linear, and they keep on changing with the season, with the kind of new kind of interactions which are going on in the system. So all these studies form a part of landscape ecology. So what are the principles? Basically, these principles of landscape ecology study, or the types of landscape ecologies, are divided in four categories. One is landscapes and regions. Second is patches and corridors, which are, as the name denotes, it is less, the area is lesser than the landscape. In landscape, there is more homogeneous, like large pieces of land are studied, and in patches and corridors, comparatively lower level of area is involved. Then you have mosaics, and fourth is our applications. So in landscapes and region, again we have landscape and region, and patches, corridor, matrix is there. Okay, so I'll give you an example where you can visually identify what is this. Then in patches and corridors, again we have large natural vegetation patches. Then patch shape is there, like these are small patches. When large natural vegetation patches exist simultaneously, it is considered under the third category. Then when there are small patches which are completely independent, then it is in fourth category. Then what are the interactions among ecosystems? What are the meta population dynamics which are going on between the existing population and existing species in the ecosystem? Then you have mosaics, where we have to study the landscape resistance, the kind of barriers, the kind of resistance that is there to the flow of species, to the flow of energy in between the species, and what are the disturbances which are being caused in the landscape. And in grain size, we have to study the coarse grained landscape, including the large patch, ecological benefit, multi-habitat species, including humans. We have to study how humans are impacting in that area. And then you have to see the changes which have been there over a period of time, so that you can identify what are the measures which need to be taken for sustainable development and management in that landscape area. So in applications, we'll be studying aggregate with outliers. So basically, outlier is something is going on smoothly for a period of years, and immediately or haphazardly there has been some development which has impacted the land in a manner so that the whole ecology of that system has been disturbed, and the dynamics which were continuing for many years, they have been disturbed, and some unnatural dynamics are going on, okay, which are basically disturbing the structure of the landscape. So those kind of aggregates with outliers have to be determined, and yet we have to ensure that small patches and corridors exist throughout the developed area, and the outliers of human activity, they have to be arranged along the boundaries, so that so similar concept is involved when we go for habitat protection through ex situ and in situ measures for biodiversity, like we create bioreserve areas or national parks. So we create a landscape and restrict that human activity should be within 2 kilometers or within 5 kilometers of that area, and beyond that area is a completely restricted zone, so that these outliers due to human activities are controlled. So outliers basically means something normal, something uniform is going on, and there is suddenly a spike, and there is suddenly a change which is due to some haphazard activity, or which can also be due to some natural phenomenon, which is basically not uniform, or which is not basically natural, had been there for a long. For example, some natural disaster happens, natural fire happens, or there is an earthquake, or there is some kind of landslide has happened. So that has created an outlier, a different kind of patch, or different kind of a system, or a disturbance in the natural ecological landscape of that area. Then there can be indispensable patterns can be there, where no substitute can be there for the ecological benefit, and you have to preserve that indispensable pattern to ensure the ecological dynamics keep on going, and key species of those large patches should be conserved for these kind of patterns. So this is the kind of patches and scales we are discussing. So in the bottom part of this picture, you can see that there is a greater patch mosaic. Okay, so there are many agricultural fields and patches are there, and flat lands are there. It can be agricultural land, or it can be flat land existing in the forest itself, and there is a habitation at one corner. Okay, so out of this patch we have taken a cluster of forest patch which is existing in the center. Then in those patches we are studying the individual forest patch. So this scale of ecological investigation will change according to the kind of project activity you are proposing. For example, the top level image shows you the individual forest patch, and if you want to study some impact of insect, or some kind of insect attack is there, or some kind of disease is occurring in these kind of forest patches. So you can say, okay, I will select this forest patch which is at the top section of the image. But if you want to see the overall change in the ecological landscape, then you have to see the lower side image. So because there you don't have to see the minute details, you don't have to see the species, you don't have to see the kind of insect or disease which are attacking, but you want to see the temporal and spatial variation across a larger time scale. So for that purpose you have to take an imagery which is larger in size. So again, what are the different methods to study landscape ecology? Over the years, we have now global positioning system, remote sensing techniques, and experimentation is there now. For example, I'm telling you about the Google Earth. Google Earth comes very handy when you have to collect some data immediately, even before starting the project. You want to know what can be the major sensitive sites around that landscape within a 5 kilometer area, within 500 meters, starting from the core area, within 500 meter of that landscape boundary. Then if we go to 500 meters to 5 kilometer, that will be counted as a buffer area. So from 5 kilometer to 10 kilometer, we can study what are the different kind of species and challenges and the sensitive areas. For example, if it's a coming up site for any project activity, we had this World Bank site in Amritsar, where a water treatment plant is coming up. So there we studied what kind of sensitive locations are existing around that project boundary, and the project boundary was located near the hospitals or schools or temples. So we have to take the human factor as well. So when we went to the site, because many things are not visible in the imagery or in your Google Earth image, even in satellite imagery also. So for that purpose, you have to do ground truthing. When you go to the site, you sometimes see there are many tribal people, or nomads are living there around the project site, because that land has been lying vacant. So people who are not having homeless people who are not having any shelter, so they keep on making some temporary sheds there, and they start living there. So you cannot just completely go to that project site and tell them to discontinue their economic activities or just relocate from that area immediately. So you have to do those kind of socioeconomic studies also. You have to establish how we can provide them alternative areas for habitation, and how we can relocate their income generation activities and rehabilitate them in a manner so that their life is also not disturbed. So that is a very important criteria in international projects. Specifically in government projects also it is important, but sometimes government has that upper hand in letting the rule of land get implemented. They can say it is for the community purpose, and it is a community land, and you are encroaching this land. So basically they are encroaching. But in international projects, even if they are encroaching, but if they are marginalized group of people, if they are indigenous group of people, they need to be rehabilitated as per the guidelines of the project implementation. So under the approaches, you have tools for collection, analysis, integration of both spatial and non-spatial data, as well as data sampling and observation techniques are there. Then experimentation has to be done. And these all methods will vary according to your objectives. So if I have an objective of conserving that habitat, moving towards sustainable development, then I will have broader objectives like construction of some infrastructure facilities, or taking care of bird count, and identifying what kind of migratory birds are coming there. But if I have some specific objective to check the kind of pest which are encroaching that area in a particular season, then I will be moving more towards integration of landscape ecology as well as the zoology, or the study of fauna in that area, specifically arthropods or insects in that area. Okay, so there the kind of models and there the kind of sampling will be different. For the kind of insects you have to do different kind of sampling. But if for I'm doing it for the overall sustainable development, then there will be different kind of sampling. There will be different kind of mitigation measures that will be evolved for socio-economic interactions, for income generation activities. So these methods will change according to your objectives and according to the kind of study at ground level you are implementing. Then there are remote sensing techniques are there, global positioning systems are there, and you can have satellite imagery. But again, whatever kind of data you are obtaining through remote sensing or GPS, you have to do ground truthing by going to the locations, and location of sampling points should be done. Then major tools also include your spatial statistics, like Fractal is there, patch analyst is there. Then you have Systat is also a software where large scale statistical data can be integrated. Then spatially explicit models are there, ArcGIS is there. Okay, so these kind of modeling tools, and there are many people who have studied environment sciences and environment management, and then they go for GIS studies, so that they can utilize their environment related in that information and knowledge in GIS systems, and do these kind of studies at larger spatial and temporal scales. So for different kind of your requirement, if you see there are three different kind of studies: ground, airborne, and spaceborne. And if you see in multispectral, the last objective is landscape classification and mapping. So if you are taking multispectral data, your objective which will be fulfilled is landscape classification and mapping. If you see hyperspectral data, then you will have landscape ecological parameters and quantitative extraction of that area related with the ground objects. And if you take radar based data, then it will be landscape quantification, classification, and mapping. For example, these days you need for any groundwater clearance for any new or existing project, you have to take clearance from the groundwater department of the state or central groundwater board. So when you are going for clearance, you have to establish what kind of groundwater reserves are there. So there you have to do radar based studies, which are faster uh, to be conducted in terms of the kind of technology that is involved. So there we can have the data of groundwater related with like kind of infrared data is there. So wherever large groundwater reserves are there, so that imagery will show you a specific color related with the existence of groundwater. So it's a very fast paced data acquiring technology. So there you can identify, okay, this much groundwater reserves are there, and then you can give in your clearance report, okay, this is my demand, this many KLDs is my demand, these are the reserves, whether this that as per CWB requirement this area falls in overexploited, exploited, or whichever zone it is falling, you can mention that. Then you can give calculation of how much you will be recharging and how much you will be recycling, so that in future you are not causing over extraction of groundwater. And whatever you are extracting or using, you have to uh, see whether either you have to pay charges to the groundwater for the groundwater you are extracting, or you have to suggest the measures through which you will be recharging or recycling that water, so there is not over exploitation of groundwater resource. So these kind of technologies are helping you in many studies related with environment. And then what is the scale in landscape ecology? So the scale is basically a degree of spatial reduction indicating the smaller dimensions representing a larger unit of measure. And we all have studied in geography uh, in 10th class how scale is important in study of maps and topographic sheets. So there one unit of topographic map denotes a certain area of land in actual ground situation. Okay, so for different imageries you have different representative fraction of distance on the map to distance on the surface of earth. For example, it can vary to 1:10,000 to 1:1 lakh. Okay, so these are the applications of different scales for different kind of study. For example, if you have to see pathogen outbreak, that I'm telling you how disease is spreading, how insect infestation is taking place. So it can vary from 10 meter square to 10 raised to power 12 meter square, depending upon the area of your landscape. Then again, if you are doing soil development, then it will be on the larger scale. But if you are doing it for the glacial cycles, then your temporal scale has to vary from 1 year to 10 raised to power 6 year. Okay, so the temporal scale will be so high for study of glacial interglacial cycles, because you have to see a pattern which is existing for 100 of years. Okay, but if you are seeing a pathogen outbreak, then the temporal scale may not be that wide, but your spatial scale will be wide. Similarly, if you want to see the biological responses, then competition, productivity, or species migration, then in species migration, again, you have to see a phenomena which is spreading over 100 of years, because how every species has evolved and how extinction and speciation has taken place, that is a matter of many years. That is not just a matter of 1 or 2 years. Okay, so these different kind of studies have different temporal scales and different spatial scales over which they should be studied, to ensure that whatever conclusion you are deriving, it is well observed and it is well tabulated and concluded. Okay, then what is the significance of scale? So as I have already told you that issues which are studied on broader scale are not required for grain size analysis, which are required on a larger spatial scale. So those are like acid rain, global climate change, habitat fragmentation, which we did in the Keshopur example I'm giving you. Then the conservation of biodiversity. Then in landscape ecologists often refer like scale is a problem because many times you don't find the level of data you want to have in that scale or in that temporal scale or spatial scale. So that becomes a challenge when you actually start your studies. So before that you have to do some field studies, you have to do some collection of primary and secondary data, some literature review, what has been already done in that area, what kind of data is already there, or there is some existing GIS based data which is existing. For example, in groundwater, now you have database existing for all over India. Pan India, you can find the groundwater data and the variations in the groundwater level in CGWB website only. So you have GIS map based data in for groundwater existing in CGWB website. So there you have availability of data. But if you want to study the impact of air pollution, there you have statistical data, but imagery data or GIS based data is not existing. So you have to do that kind of pre-work before taking up any project activity. Then there is an inherent difficulty in understanding and predicting ecological attribute, because sometimes you predict something and based on that prediction or based on that hypothesis you plan your objectives, and due to the ever changing dynamics of the landscape, those predictions go wrong. So that can also be a difficulty and risk in implementation of study. So now we come to evolution and theory, how it evolved. So it evolved basically from hierarchy theory, which was the original inherent phenomena which was existing in any landscape ecology. Then it came to fractal geometry, which was evolved by Burrow and Mandelbrot, and then percolation theory, which was evolved by Stauffer and Aharoni in 1992. So it started with the most obvious theory of hierarchical structure, then which is basically system of interconnections where higher level and lower level constraints, depending on the time constraints and behavior, the ecology of the landscape is determined. So the elements which are studied there, which were conceived, and the nomenclature given to those elements, basic elements of these systems, were called holones. Okay, so that are same time both the wholes and part of the ecological system. But when we study the pattern which are changing on wider scales, they are studied under the assumptions of fractal theory, where we study the ecology on the basis of patches and mosaics that have been created in the spatial dimension of that landscape. And when we uh, assemble those spatial patterns over a large scale, and when we deal with different kind of patches over large scale, that is studied under the application of percolation theory. Okay, so it basically deals with the size, shape, and connectivity of habitats. So you can see that how hierarchical theory was more emphasizing on the smallest elements, how it conceived to fractal geometry where patches were studied, and when different kind of patches were studied together, it came into under the head of percolation theory. So the examples of fractal geometry include the use of fractal dimension as index of human interference. For example, the fractal dimension comes when you have habitat destruction due to human activities, like slash and burn activity that happens in forest of some still many people in Madhya Pradesh and Maharashtra, they are doing this slash and burn burn practice. So when they are done with the crop, they just burn it and move to the next patch or next level of forest which is existing there, and then they do some production there, and then again they burn and move to another area. So there, this kind of human interference is creating a fractal dimension. Okay, so they are causing patches within a larger forest area. So that kind of patches are due to human interference or human activities. Then we can also study insect movements. We can also study different kind of textures which are changing in the landscape, how different species are growing in different seasons over the years, and immediately due to industrialization in that area and due to impact of air pollution in that area, how certain species have just got extinct. Okay, so maybe there, that area was in Himachal, for example, there were large number of gymnosperms and pteridophytes were there, but they are very sensitive to levels of air pollution. So immediately when long road stretches were created, that the whole population of pteridophytes and bryophytes and mosses and ferns, they got just vanished from that area. So those kind of landscape textures can be studied by taking imageries of last 20-25 years, especially for the season of monsoon. Okay, so during monsoon, you will see the entire land is covered with greenery. But now there are patches which are seen existing in that area where even in monsoon, there is no greenery. So that kind of interventions can be established, and that kind of impact due to human activity can be established through study of large scale landscape texture imageries. Then species perception of landscape structure, then generation of artificial landscapes. For example, if we have to create some kind of exotic place for marriages or some farm area, so that we can do some tourism in that area. So those kind of artificial landscapes can also be generated through fractal geometry. And then percolation theory, if we see, there are examples like canopy gaps in rainforest, river flows, and co-evolution in multi-species. Like different kind of species can grow together simultaneously. So those kind of examples are studied under percolation theory, and how they can be studied. They can be studied through modeling and softwares to estimate the risk and vulnerability that is being caused to certain species due to changes in the landscape. So another scientist, Canters et al. In 1991, he studied the landscape classification. For example, for groundwater relations, you have to study a study area, and that can be a complete study area can be called a macro core, and hydrological zones and catchments can be called mesocore. And again, in that hydrological zone, there are certain geomorphological zones which are called mesocore. So different scientists have given different theories and different ideas for landscape classification and to implement these studies at different levels and scales. Then what are the factors which are affecting the changes in landscape diversity? So basically, as I already told you, fire, yesterday also we had discussed that fires, natural, man-made, or accidental fires, all are causes of large scale devastation of forest and the kind of flora and fauna that is existing there. And then agricultural intensification, as I am already discussing with you a case study of Keshopur. So there large utilization of insecticides, pesticides, and overutilization of nutrients and fertilizers, they cause the problem in the wetland. Then agricultural abandonment also can cause issues. For example, they after abandoning agriculture, they go for industrialization. So there is again a very different kind of pattern in Northeast India. Shifting agriculture is there in hilly terrains. So they keep on shifting, like I told you, slash and burn kind of pattern. So they abandon agriculture in one area and then go for another area. Then they go for another area. So in that way, they keep on impacting virgin lands or the lands which were rich in indigenous species, and then they do agriculture and then they leave that area and abandon that area, or either go for industrial activities or go for agricultural in some other area. Okay, then deforestation, then livestock grazing. Overgrazing can definitely create a very healthy and fertile land to a wasteland if you go for overgrazing, because of the restriction in movement of your cattle and grazing animals. You sometimes do overgrazing in that, in a community land or an area, that is also affecting landscape diversity. Then infrastructure development, definitely, like development of roads, railways, airports, and large scale thermal power plants, and large scale wind farms, mining projects. These all are causing infrastructure development. This kind of infrastructure development is causing, affecting the diversity of any kind of landscape. So if we link with landscape ecology, why we are studying, why landscape ecology is important for natural resource management? Because continuously our population is increasing, and the demand for natural resources is again exponentially increasing with the increase in population. So both quality and quantity have been reduced intensively of natural resources. So again, if we see the world's biodiversity, there have been continuous loss of many species which are threatened and endangered. And then the degradation of ecosystem goods and services, the kind of goods which we are extracting from, for example, timber or wood, or fuel, or food products like medicinal plants or honey, or crops, or vegetables, fruits, any kind of good or any kind of services like reduction in soil erosion, or creation of top healthy layer of soil that was given by our forest. So those kind of services are now degrading day by day, though the kind of quality and quantity of goods is degrading day by day. So there is an immediate need for taking up natural resource management projects. There is an immediate need of identifying issues in any naturally existing landscape area, and do study and evolve mitigation measures which can help in sustaining health of that integrity, landscape integrity of that area. Okay, so what are the different applications? So we can understand causes and ecological consequences of spatial heterogeneity. We can establish the structure, dynamic relationships. So you basically start when you have some, most of the times, till the problem is there, nobody takes any action. So no project is conceptualized before any problem comes. Okay, that is only under the precautionary approach of United Nations or the climatic change which we had studied years back. But if we see from industry point of view or from private institutions point of view, they take it only for the legal compliance, or sometimes for the voluntary purpose if they have to abide by their ISO 14000. Okay, but otherwise we have to identify first the problem, what is the issue that is arising in that particular area. Then we have to study the existing structure, relationships of living beings, natural resource management, and what kind of values are creating by the natural resources in that landscape ecology. Okay, so accordingly we can devise and study, and we can identify what are the different tools and set of techniques which we require for that particular objective to be fulfilled. And then there is again models like Ecolicon is there, Ecolicon. Ecolicon is basically a spatial model which links ecological and economic considerations. And many of times I have seen while working with these kind of projects, you have access to these models free of cost. They are available through EPA, Environment Protection Agency of US, and you can have access to these models free of cost through international agencies. Also, there are many courses which are being run in specialization of these studies through like international online courses, like Coursera is there. So you can go to the Coursera website and do some groundwater modeling study or natural resource management study. Okay. So future of landscape ecology is basically from single scale management, you have to go to multi-scale management. Okay, so what we are talking about is right now, okay, I have identified a problem. I have to identify the scale at which that problem needs to be resolved. Then I have to get data on that scale, analyze that data. Then according to the analysis, I'll make some conclusion. And evolve some mitigation measures for implementation and resolving of the conflicts that are existing. Then, but in future, we have to see how we can move from single scale management to multi-scale management. So we at different scales, different problems are existing, and yet we are able to get all the data and merge it into a single platform and single platform of software, so that we can analyze it in a better manner. We can understand the dynamics on a higher level. So that is the future of landscape ecology. So from isolated management, again, we should go to the integrated management. We have to integrate everything. We have to integrate flora, fauna, human component, the local inhabiting population, the tourist who will be visiting there, to increase the economy, to give a boost to the economy of that area. How we can ensure that farm stays can be established in that area, and yet that there is no threat to the local ecology. And local ecology, economy, as well as environment, that all are going hand in hand. So that can be done through integrated management. And then from static management to adaptive, that management which we are proposing, that should also be adaptive with changing times, with changing dynamics, with changing season, and with changing variations of species in that area. So it's a very I should say very high standard, like high standard which we are expecting from our future of landscape ecology. But if it is done, if it is implemented, it will definitely ensure our sustainable management of natural resources. Then you have to see how this continuum of cross-disciplinary nature of landscape ecology, there are different kind of research topics which I have given on the right hand side. So this landscape sustainability can be studied through sustainable land architecture, land change science, land use pattern, biodiversity, ecosystems, landscape genetics. And there are many international research papers which are available on these topics if you want to have more knowledge about these. Then what was the impact of Earth Summit of 1992, which happened in Rio de Janeiro, and sustainability science? Because that was the starting point of sustainability science and starting point of study of landscape ecology. Okay, so for the first time, somebody through this concept of social and economic sustainability, which are pre-requirements for environmental sustainability. So it emphasized the importance of partnership and solidarity and how it can help in the sustainable development. Again, in the backdrop of issues concerning the important global causes, Gates et al. In 2001, she published a paper in Sustainability Science in 2001, and that gave a complete relevance of landscape ecological thinking to the concerns of sustainability science. So that was a key point which started scientists and landscape managers to think about the concerns of sustainability that should be ensured in any project or activity related with the landscape ecology. So now at present, there is a debate which is going on that how we should change from ecological point to a more anthropocentric one, and how landscapes and ecosystems can be viewed as a resource for providing a range of goods and services. So you can definitely see them as a resource for providing goods and services, but simultaneously you have to focus on what we have perceived should be the future of landscape ecology. So if we can achieve that, attain that perceived future of landscape ecology, definitely every landscape can act as a resource, and then again it can be sustainably managed. So again, I have already discussed about the practical applications, like groundwater management projects can be done. Then wetland management projects are there, which we will study tomorrow. I'll give you more information about wetland management projects. Then project closure reports I have discussed. Then design of wildlife corridors. For example, if you have to implement any large scale projects, most of the times these large scale projects have patches and some areas where high level of biodiversity or population of certain species are inhabiting for a very long period of time, and you cannot disturb those species and their inhabiting areas. Okay, so for that purpose you have to design wildlife corridors in these projects, so that your project should can also be implemented, and the impacts of your projects should be mitigated as per the design of the landscape ecology. Okay, then in river mining also we do environment impact assessment, and I want to give you an idea how these techniques of Google Earth helped us in assessing river mining projects. So in river mining projects, there are large stretches of river where people are going for sand mining and minor mineral minings on the banks of rivers. So that purpose you have to take environment clearance, and before for environment clearance you have to do environment impact assessment. And in environment impact assessment we study different kind of patches and different kind of banks which are existing along the river, and where the sand mining is profitable as well as sustainable for the ecology of that area, and where it is not sustainable for the landscape of that area. So when, and also you can determine through Google Earth data, because when we go for presentations they have a live screen where Google Earth is open, and it's a very big wall size screen is there, and then you cannot hide any kind of data. Even if you have done some replenishment study which states okay, the kind of reserves which we are extracting, they get replenished every year. Okay, your replenishment study might tell you some story which complements or which helps you in getting environment clearance for your project, but with the kind of real ground data which is available through Google Earth or through satellite imageries. So these assessors or the people who are assessing your project for environment clearance, they can see live data, and they can also ask you how will you explain this data that the existing river is under degradation and you are telling us to give clearance for your project. So that kind of tools are available for even the implementation agencies, even the agencies who are monitoring the impacts of large scale infrastructure projects. So it is not just that you have access to these tools and techniques. Even the implementation agencies are having this data with them, and accordingly you have to arrive and you have to identify the area which where minimum impact has been there, and where you can have maximum mitigation measures to ensure that the whole structure of that riverbed doesn't change after your project is completed, because that data can also be evaluated. So from that point of view also, these kind of tools, technologies and studies of landscape are very significant if we want to identify what kind of damage has been caused by certain infrastructure project. Okay. So here are few of the references. So these are all links. You can add these links, click on these links and directly go to the reference material. So thank you everyone, and I would like to welcome you all to ask any query or have any suggestion or recommendation. You can share, please.